Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to our video series on the topic of homeostasis. Now, in this video, we're going to be talking about the largest organ in your body. Now, what do you think that is? No, it is not your buttock. It is your skin. It covers every part of you. And besides being the largest organ in your body, the skin is also a very important organ. Which is why when it gets damaged, for instance, when people get burned, it is a very unpleasant experience. Well, you might have read some news articles before about fire disasters, and you might have come across this term, first degree, second degree, and third degree burns. Now, what exactly does that mean? So here's a diagram showing you what a first, second, and third degree burn roughly looks like. And you can see that as the degrees increase, the damage to the skin becomes deeper and deeper. Which hurts more? It might sound like an obvious question. You might think that it is the third degree that hurts more, but people actually sometimes report that the third degree hurts less than the other two. And that's something interesting to hold in your mind, something to think about. Why do you think that's so? As we go through this rest of the topic, we'll revisit this question again later. So what are the functions of the skin? Well, we've already talked a bit about it. The skin, firstly, is a protective barrier. So it is actually the first line of defense against all the pathogens, the bacteria that could come into our body. Besides that, the skin also helps in regulating temperature. You might already think of things like sweating or your hair standing. It is also a sense organ, right? We feel and touch, and it's our skin that allows us to interact with our environment. And finally, it's also an excretory organ, as we learned in the last topic. Sweat. Some metabolic waste products are removed through our sweat. So for the rest of this video, we'll be looking more in detail at the structure and the function of the skin. Again, structure and function being such important concepts in biology. And here are the textbook pages to look at. So here's a diagram showing us the different layers of the skin. And you know how they say that beauty is only skin deep? Well, I beg to differ. As a biologist, looking below the skin, I find that it is very beautiful and wonderful as well. And the structure of the skin is so well designed to perform all its various functions. Now, the first thing to notice is that skin is made up of two main layers. We have the outer layer called the epidermis over here, and the layer below called the dermis. This third layer is actually below the skin. This is the layer of subcutaneous fat. Sub meaning below, cutaneous meaning skin. Now, the epidermis itself is composed of several layers. This is entirely extra, just for your interest. So the topmost layer is called the cornified layer, not because it's very corny, but because it's made out of many dead skin cells, up to 20 to 30 layers of it. Now, this is the layer which keeps shedding itself, right? That's why when you clean your house, you find little skin flakes around after a while. We shed skin, and that's where the dead skin cells come from. Below the cornified layer, we have the granular layer. These are made out of living cells, which are still alive, but they're moving upwards. And they're going to be replacing the dead skin cells which flake off. So eventually, as they move up, they will die and become part of the cornified layer. And finally, this little purple line here represents the Malpighian layer. The Malpighian layer is the layer of cells which are actively dividing. So these are dividing and giving rise to new cells, which will move into the granular layer, which will eventually die and move to the cornified layer. Now, interestingly, the Malpighian layer also contains cells called melanocytes, which might sound interesting because it sounds a bit like melanin, right? Which is that pigment which helps protect you from the sunlight, the darkening pigment in your skin. Alright? So melanocytes contain melanin or produce melanin. And melanin is what gives rise to the beautiful range of skin colors that we see in all the people around us. Right? The more melanin you have, the darker your skin tone, and so on. So we've just touched the surface of the skin. And now we're going to move on to talk about some of the important structures in the skin which are involved in thermoregulation, or regulating the temperature of your body. In your syllabus, these are the ones that are often more emphasized and tested, so you need to be really familiar with these structures. So we're going to go one by one through them. So the first structure is our hair. Now hair covers every part of our body. It's not just found on our head. But you might be wondering, why is it that the hair on our head and certain other parts of our body grows longer than the hair on, let's say, our arms? Well, I'm not very sure of the answer myself, so why don't you go find out and share with us more in class. And if your name is Harry or Harrison, then all the more this is a Harry question for you to find out more. So here are the key structures to do with our hair. Firstly, you can see that the hair is embedded in the dermis. So it actually goes right into the dermis layer. However, the hair follicle itself, the hair follicle is where the hair grows in. The hair follicle itself is formed from the epidermis, right? You can see the epidermis forming this depression into the dermis, which forms the follicle. And the hair itself is formed by the division of cells at the hair papilla. So you can see that the bottom of the follicle, the hair papilla, that's where cells are dividing, giving rise to your hair and causing it to grow. Now over here, you see this structure. It is a muscle. It's called the hair erector muscle. When this muscle contracts, it will cause your hair to stand on its ends and the skin to have an appearance of goosebumps, right? Especially when the weather outside is cold. And finally, we have the sebaceous glands. These are glands which secrete an oily substance called sebum into the follicle, and it helps to lubricate your hair and also keep your skin smooth. Right? This doesn't really play any role in regulating temperature, but it's there to just maintain your hair so it looks very nice and attractive to others. Now, however, it is also the sebaceous glands which kind of give rise to a problem that you might be facing now in your adolescence, pimples. You see, it is the accumulation of sebum, and it's when the follicle gets kind of stuck and plugged that sebum builds up underneath, and eventually the follicle kind of bursts, and that's what causes you to have pimples. Right, now that you know more about the hair and the structure of the skin, go read up more. You can find out the scientific reason why you get pimples. Now, next up is the sweat gland. The sweat gland looks a bit like this coiled tube here, and it secretes sweat. You notice that it is in close association with a blood vessel. This blood vessel probably supplies blood to the sweat gland, and also is where the water and metabolic waste products will move out from the blood vessel into the sweat gland. This sweat gland, the sweat that is secreted, will then pass through the sweat duct to the surface where is the sweat pore. And this, of course, we know sweating is important for excretion and also for regulating temperature. Alright, I hope you're finding this easy so far. No sweat, right? Alright, next we have the nerve endings. These are extensions of nerves which end in your skin, and these are there to detect pressure and pain, when someone pokes you, and also there to detect temperature changes. The thermoreceptors, which we'll see are important in regulating temperature. Alright, next up we have the adipose tissue. This is all found in the layer below the dermis, right? It's in the subcutaneous fat layer. And adipose tissue is made up of cells which store fat. That's important because it helps to insulate and reduce heat loss from your body. Besides that, it's helpful to learn this word adipose. It is a very polite and scientific and friendly way of referring to fat. So instead of calling someone fat, just tell them they have lots of adipose tissue and that you really admire them. Alright, that's more positive. Alright, we now move on to blood vessels. So your skin, in particular the dermis layer, contains many blood vessels. You can see near the surface of the skin, the blood capillaries. Blood actually comes from your heart to the arteries, which branch into arterioles. And these arterioles branch into blood capillaries near the surface of your skin. Why does your dermis have so many blood vessels? The same reason why every part of your body has blood vessels, to supply it with oxygen and nutrients. Importantly, we will see that these arterioles play an important role in regulating temperature. Because the arterioles are able to constrict, which means they can become narrower, and dilate, which means they can become wider to help regulate body temperature. So let's see how this happens. Alright, so firstly, let's look at the constriction of the arterioles. So this is called vasoconstriction. Right? Vaso means vessel. So vasoconstriction, imagine if the arterioles, the lumen of the arterioles becomes more narrow over here. Well, this will reduce the amount of blood that flows into the blood capillaries, which are near the skin surface. And the opposite of that is called vasodilation. Vasodilation is when the arterioles become wider. What will happen then? Well, this will increase the amount of blood that flows to the blood capillaries near the surface. Now, how does that help in regulating temperature? Well, the key point is that if more blood comes to the surface, that means vasodilation, more blood comes to the surface, then more heat can be lost from the surface of the skin, right? Because the blood will bring all the very warm blood from the center of your body to the surface, so you lose a lot of heat. However, if you have vasoconstriction and there's less blood flowing to the capillaries near the skin surface, then this heat loss from the skin surface will be reduced. Now, vasoconstriction and vasodilation is due to the contraction and relaxation of muscles in the arterial wall. So here's a diagram of the arteriole. Remember that an arteriole has a structure that's kind of similar to an artery. So there's also a smooth muscle layer, right? And that smooth muscle layer is able to contract, in which case it will cause the lumen to become more narrow, vasoconstriction, or it can relax in vasodilation and cause the lumen to become wider. Now, can this happen for capillaries? Do capillaries have muscle layer? And the answer is no, they don't. So vasodilation and vasoconstriction only applies to arterioles, not the capillaries. So be careful when you write about it in your answers. Now there's one more structure that we need to learn about, and that is called the shunt vessel. Now the shunt vessel is found in some parts of the skin, and the shunt vessel is a vessel that connects the skin arterioles with the skin venules. And it's located deeper in the skin, not so near the skin surface. So you can see on our diagram here, here's the shunt vessel, here's our skin arteriole. Now remember that blood moves into the skin arteriole, and then from the skin arteriole, blood can flow into the blood capillaries which are near the skin surface, and then blood will then flow back into the skin venule where it will move back towards the heart. Now the shunt vessel provides like an alternative pathway for the blood to flow. So when the blood flows through the arteriole, instead of moving into the blood capillaries near the skin surface, it can also move through the shunt vessel, a bit like a shortcut, move through the shunt vessel into the skin venule. Now what's this for? It turns out that the shunt vessels are also important in controlling the amount of blood that flows into the blood capillaries near the skin surface. So let's have a look at how. So for example, in a hot environment, the body will try to lose more heat. Now in order to lose more heat, the body will increase the amount of blood that flows into the blood capillaries near the skin surface. Then heat will be lost through radiation. Now, how does the body increase the amount of blood to the blood capillaries near the skin surface? Firstly, the arterioles will dilate. So these arterioles here will become wider and more blood will flow through. Secondly, the shunt vessels will constrict. So this shunt vessel here will become narrower. So we kind of like cut off the shortcut and blood is channeled into the blood capillaries near the surface instead. So more blood flows to the surface and more heat is lost. Now in a cold environment, we see the opposite. So in a cold environment, the arterioles will constrict, so become narrower here, less blood will flow into the arterioles, and the shunt vessels will dilate. So the shunt vessels become wider, this shortcut becomes available, blood will flow into the shunt vessel instead of flowing into the blood capillaries near the surface. So less blood flows to the surface of the skin and less heat is lost through the surface of the skin. Alright, that's all for this video. In the next video, we'll be looking at how the body regulates its temperature, and we'll be coming back to the skin. Alright, see you there.